I took the implied advice from last week's discussion and watched Collateral over the weekend. So I just wanted to report back that yes, indeed, it's a great movie. Michael Mann is a genius. He needs to make more movies because he's getting old, and we gotta get some more out of him before he goes.
A buddy of mine actually posted a Michael Mann clip yesterday. It was Al Pacino in Heat, which is just like, I mean, we could talk about Michael Mann forever, but there's so many great Pacino lines in that movie. I mean, I really do think that Heat is where it is in the canon on the strength of his performance, because every sentence just has like such gravitas to it. It's amazing.
It's in the what place in whose canon? This is Michael Mann's canon, Pacino's canon, number 1, number 5. What do you think?
Ooh. Well, I have an unpopular opinion here. I don't actually care for a whole lot of mob movies. So for me, this is probably number 2, at least in Pacino's canon. But the only reason I'm not putting it number 1 is because I don't have Pacino's canon like memorized well enough to say offhand.
I mean, it's a damn good choice, regardless. It's a damn
right.
Good choice.
Yeah. It's. But I think what hits the most for it is the self-awareness of his character, which I think about a lot as a veteran. Is this idea of like being aware of the toll that your work takes on your life, and the kind of cost to do the kind of work that we have all done at various times and continue to do in some ways. There's actually a Palmer Luckey article that our friend Noah Scheinbaum reposted today. And Palmer just talks about that. He's like, listen, this is not sustainable.
All of his combat experience? Sorry. What are you
no,
talking
he's
about?
just talking about the unsustainability of like waking up and building a grudge-based company based off of wrongs from 10 years ago. He says it. This is a direct quote. He's like, I wake up with my teeth gritted and my fists clenched based off things people did to me 10 years ago, and I run my company like that. And it cannot last, but it's good for the company and it's good for the country. Yeah. And I think a lot of us, and that was Al Pacino's line, right? The angst keeps me sharp.
Yeah.
You know, it burns, like you're burning your candle at both ends, but that is like the price you pay if you are trying to do something great or trying to do something meaningful.
Dave, do you have an opinion on Pacino canon? Number 1, number 3, number 5? I don't know. Heat, where that figures into your thinking?
Yeah, that exchange between Pacino and De Niro at the cafe, where they're just talking like men, and I think his line is like, we're just sitting here, you and I, like a couple of regular fellas. You do what you got to do, and I do what I got to do. Was one of the most powerful scenes in not just a Michael Mann film, but cinema, in my opinion. There's a lot of tension in that scene.
So the implied task, I think, coming out of this one, for me anyway, is I guess I got to watch Heat.
I'm going to go through the whole Michael Mann catalog and just rush up. I think that's my plan.
So I did 2 Michael Mann movies this past weekend: Collateral and Last of the Mohicans. Also an exceptional film. I think it was like the extended or the director's cut, which I'd never watched before. I'd only watched maybe the standard version or whatever. But
is Michael Mann cheating by using Daniel Day-Lewis, Al Pacino, Tom Cruise, Jamie Foxx, all of these stellar actors? Would the movies be as good without these?
Don't forget Mark Ruffalo. Don't forget Mark.
Don't forget Mark Ruffalo. I wouldn't dare forget the Hulk.
Yeah,
Simon, you're definitely Wangro.
Oh, come on!
You're the
Skullet.
You're the loose cannon, Wangro.
I hate that. I hate everything about
Convince
that.
me I'm wrong though.
Yeah, I have no rebuttal. That's very unfortunate for me and my self-esteem. So thanks for that, Dave, buddy, old pal.
So I'm gonna transition us into the talk track today. Welcome to the rough transition. I'm gonna rough transition us in. Welcome to the Goat Rodeo. Dave and Simon and I, military veterans and colleagues at Reveal Technology, we discuss the week's news with a fair bit of snark and some hopefully semi-expert commentary, and hopefully you find it useful. Follow us on your podcast platform of choice. I think we do most on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and then we release a video version on YouTube. Please drop your comments and give us a follow. Before we were riffing on the Michael Mann canon at all, we were giggling about this JD Vance meme that somebody dropped into our shared doc. Simon, I know you get off on these. What's the latest on this? What's happening?
I mean, the for me, the best JD Vance memes have nothing to do with JD Vance. There's just applying internet humor to the form.
Yeah.
But I think, keeping it topical to the news at the same time, it's funny the extent to which JD Vance has become sort of like the cultural main character in a lot of ways over like the past several weeks because of the memes and the Zelensky meeting. And then this week there was like a leaked rant about Elon Musk, allegedly, and I don't know the veracity of it, that I think in any normal world would have made JD Vance, the main character of the news cycle. But as we're all aware, this is not a normal world that we're in, and instead.
Wait, I'm sorry. What happened? What happened?
Yeah, the actual main character of the news.
I wasn't on that Signal channel. What happened? What happened?
Yeah, so as I'm sure anyone listening to this has probably seen in all other news channels in the entire country at this point, some very sensitive Yemeni war plans were discussed in a Signal channel that also included the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. Mistakenly, he was not supposed to be in that Signal chat while they were discussing sensitive war plans, and it's going to kick open a really fascinating can of worms with Congress, actually, because D&I and head of the CIA, so Ratliff and Tulsi Gabbard, are testifying this week, and I don't think whatever they thought they were testifying about is going to be the topic of the day. I think it's going to be the security measures at the senior levels of the Trump admin now. Which is tough. It's always a bummer when you have all these great ideas for the wonderful policy goals and objectives you're going to achieve as the administration, and instead you're going to talk about the news cycle.
So here, I have some questions, and we're not going to answer these definitively, but it might be fun to speculate. Why did that specific Signal channel exist? Why was Jeff Goldberg, I think that's his name, the editor-in-chief at The Atlantic, why was he on this channel with a bunch of admin officials? I could imagine having such a channel, but was he added by mistake, or did somebody just were they talking about something else in that channel, and they started talking about war plans in the Arabian Peninsula, but they just dropped into the wrong channel? That's strange to me, the whole thing.
So, it's obviously super common for senior government officials to use Signal to communicate with reporters. So I'm sure that at some point, whoever created this Signal channel, which is probably unlikely to be one of the principals here, right? I don't think the National Security Advisor is creating Signal channels for his folks to communicate in. It's probably a staffer somewhere. Do
you think Jeff Goldberg created it in the hopes that he would get some massive scoop?
I don't think that no, and definitely not. And the reason I say that is because the initial reporting doesn't even attribute directly to folks. It's because he's hedging his bets. So he's like, all right, so someone responded who was using the name of Ratliff. I don't actually know if it was Ratliff because he doesn't know these numbers and he'd never interacted with them before. So it's populating as some very senior principals in the NatSec sphere. But he has no way of knowing. He thought it was a joke at first. He's on record saying, I didn't think this could be real.
Simon, it's Ratcliffe. There's a C.
Ratcliffe. Sorry.
It's okay.
Apologies to Ratliff and Ratcliffe, whoever you may be, wherever you may be.
Yeah, you're good.
If I had him saved in my phone in a Signal channel, I'd know for sure. But unfortunately, I don't. So tragically.
So what are the implications here? I've seen everything from obviously the principal should immediately resign to bulwark of defense around the Trump senior team and everything in between. What do you think actually happens here?
I think nothing actually happens. Yeah. I think there'll be some uncomfortable questions at some hearings, and that's it.
Yeah.
Speaker Johnson and President Trump are both on record already as saying, some folks made a mistake. We took care of it. We're moving on. This is probably the right call, in my opinion.
I'll just note that President Trump, flashed around Iranian war plans on a golf course not too many months ago.
That's right. Soleimani.
Yeah, that's right. And claimed that too. That's a totally different thing. But yes. Yeah.
Simon, I disagree. I think the very tangible thing that happens next is they tell all of us that we're no longer allowed to use Signal for government correspondence. One of my colleagues was joking on LinkedIn yesterday, making the joke that he's a part of 15 government Signal threads that are all talking about the government Signal thread leak.
That's very funny.
Yeah, that's true. There will be a classic different spanks for different ranks kickback, I think, for junior folks. And let's be honest, that was actually my first thought when the news came out, is so much of what we do and what tactical commanders do takes place on Signal. Yep. It has become like a de facto, like, useful communication channel that is seen as protected, but for the record, it is not. You cannot have classified conversations on Signal. It is not cleared for that. Anyone who thinks it is, think again. You'll get in a lot of trouble, unless you're, national security advisor. Different conversation. Rightfully so, for the record. And very practically, nobody knows actually whether it's unbreakable and actually secure, right? Separate from like the classified network channel thing that you're describing, nobody knows for sure whether there are exploits or not, right? I mean, somewhere out there, a cybersecurity expert is screaming, just listening to this already. Yeah. But my instinct with all those things, and this is the smart way to do it for, I think, folks at our echelon, everything is breakable. Treat everything as if it could be breakable. Dave, do you think the thing that happens, to pull on your thread a little bit harder here, do you think like a junior private goes to jail over this? Like some sad Lance Corporal goes over to jail. Some sad junior enlisted guy just gets punted to the brig. Guaranteed. And one of the early, I don't think we published it, unrecorded versions of this podcast, Simon and I were jamming on this exact topic, which is they're going to do it. If it's that much more convenient, like some portion of the NatSec atmosphere is going to do it. They're going to use, we were talking about in the context of Chinese made drones, but they're going to use Signal unless you give them an alternative. And that's it's frustrating. Yeah. It's frustrating for me because, here at Reveal, we go through the pain of DD254 and the pain of building up the security apparatus so that we can do things correctly in the right way and handle CUI information or classified information correctly and go through the pain of like, okay, let's make sure we have access to a classified space at a federally funded research center or in academia or whatever. And it's really hard and we do all that stuff and it's wildly inconvenient. Maybe this will be our SecDef and National Security Advisor. Maybe this will be the thing that really shakes DoD loose on BYOD software. One of my favorite pet topics, but the DoD spends an unbelievable amount of money for devices, cell phones, tablets, computers for soldiers, sailors, and airmen. Not Marines, though. Not Marines. I note that you didn't say Marines, and it's because Marines still don't have smartphones. I mean, we're 18 years post iPhone launch. Marines still don't have smartphones. So they don't have tactical devices, but they do have, yes. They do have their own, government issued devices to do work. Sure. But there's not nearly enough devices for all of the people that are in the DoD. So you have this huge population of folks who can't access their increasingly digital records, and admin, your guardsmen can't access anything unless they go back to the station. And there's a solution, and it's BYOD software. And there's a bunch of solutions out there that are really interesting, several of which that were developed specifically for JSOC, 3-letter agencies, stuff like that, to be able to access government info in really, hairy situations. Maybe so. This is what you're proposing. What you're proposing is bring your own device, bring your own smartphone, and then you opt into the government provided mobile device manager (MDM) layer that then has some ability to surveil and monitor and secure your device. So no, I think that model will never work. There's actually a company called Hypori that you should look up if you haven't heard of them. They do a really cool thing. I don't know who that is. This is not an ad read. Keep going, Simon. It's not an ad read for Hypori, but it's an interesting piece of tech because it gets away from that device manager model. It's literally a virtual machine where every pixel is encrypted. So nothing lives on your phone, because if anything ever goes on your phone is now subject to seizure by the government forever in perpetuity. So you have to I actually think that's kind of similar to what I'm describing, but yeah. But like if you did like any device manager software, eventually you would have data touching your phone. And this company has come up with a pretty interesting solution where none of those documents, none of that data stream actually lives on your phone. You're essentially looking through an encrypted window. Yeah.
That's my point as well. Like, if we agree that they're going to do it anyway, then the solution is give them a version of something that looks like Signal, whether it's on a government phone or not. And I'm not a cybersecurity expert. I don't know what that solution is, but give them a solution, because it's 2025 and they're going to do it. And if you don't, they're going to use Signal.
And to Dave's point, if you put anything that lives on their phone, government wise, they're going to have TikTok on their phone, and they have immediately violated they've violated statute. So whatever your solution is, it cannot be government documents living on a personal device, because the vast majority of your Joes are going to download whatever they want on their own personal device, and then they're going to be in non-compliance with the law.
Question, Dave. Question. Joes, is that a derogatory term?
Joes?
Yeah. Is that derogatory? Does it depend who says it?
I think it matters who says it, and also the tone in which it's said.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, in the Marine Corps, what we call them, devil dogs. And you can get devil dogged, which means you're getting chewed out by somebody, and it's real condescending and pejorative. Or, hey, devil dogs, and it's like a term of endearment.
Yeah, I think it can go either way with Joe in the Army. Spec 4 Mafia is definitely Spec 4 Mafia is Spec 4 Mafia, Specialist Mafia.
The E4.
The E4 Mafia. The E4 Mafia is definitely a term of endearment and a point of pride for our specialists.
I mean, we've got that, Simon. You and I both were once
step down. Lance Corporal Mafia.
That's right.
Lance Corporal Underground.
We were part of the Lance Corporal Underground. Yeah.
So it's the recognition of, if you get a bunch of specialists together, the power that they collectively hold.
We'll figure it out. Make something happen.
Yeah. They always have moral certitude at some level. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Well, I got a question here that I think might orient us in an interesting direction. Despite all the chaos with the Trump admin, something we do know is that they entered they entered 2025 with something like a mandate, something close to a mandate, if not a full-on mandate, to secure the border and handle an immigration problem. It looks to me like the tail end of the Biden administration, certainly by the beginning of the Trump administration, a lot of that has been secured, right, and locked down. There's also a bunch of deportation stuff going on, illegal or legal or otherwise. Let's not get into that piece. What I'm interested maybe in talking about is kind of the reorientation of energy, which inevitably means resourcing and money, to places like Department of Homeland Security and Customs and Border Protection, and related agencies. My question at this point is should that be seen as an expansion market for companies like ours that are trying to do business with the federal government, perhaps have like military oriented solutions? Dave, what are you thinking when it comes to DHS, when it comes to building customer relationships or reseller relationships or building for ConOps and use cases? Do you see DHS as an expansion market for our company and those like us?
I absolutely do. We know a lot of folks or a lot of capabilities that have been very successful with DHS as their first or even their principal customer.
Andrel's like the poster child for that, right? The fastest ever at the time program of record from Andrel's inception in 2017 to POR award in 2019, I want to say, for their Sentry Towers. Yeah,
but interestingly, like that, Andrel sort of fell into that. I think that either Palmer Luckey or Trey Stevens, or one of them has very publicly said, DOD was too slow and bureaucratic.
Yeah.
By contrast, DHS, especially CBP, was more agile and had clear operational needs and was willing to, buy real systems and put them on contract. And so that it was out of frustration with the Department of Defense acquisition timelines that they went to DHS to ramp up.
You and I have had conversations, and Simon too, with our friend of our company, Ari Schuler from GWOT, who at the time was the CBP innovation officer, and basically stood up. Along with, I'm sure, many, many other teammates over at DHS and CBP, the streamlined pathway to innovate and onboard and field technology quickly. And has that borne out for us, or in your observation, is that a truism that it's faster, it's nimbler, it's easier to work with?
I think it is true. I think it is more fast. I think it is faster and more nimble. I think that it's just not as big, right? It's not the end game for Andrel, because it's something like, I don't know, 7% or 8% of the the total DoD budget. But they also they're not building battleships and strike fighters. Really what they need to do is pay and recruit agents and then equip those agents. And DHS has also historically been, I think statistically, much better about meeting or exceeding like small business, non-traditional contracting goals. I think the last figure I heard was like 40% of DHS contracting was smalls and NTCs. So like a very good, strong front door of the federal government. I think it plays in our strategy and many like us. I think that they've also built out a lot of the same functionality of some of the good and some of the bad of DoD for like accessing dual use or innovative technology companies, right? They have the Silicon Valley Innovation Program as a front door. They have DHS, S&T, like operational experimentation events, and so on and so forth. They've got both events and like front door early investments, try one, buy one, design sort of acquisition apparatus.
Is there a lot of customer, call it synergy, certainly not overlap per se, but are there communities talking across that barrier between DoD and DHS?
I expected to see more, right? I expected to experience, what do you do when you go down to the CBP event? Hey, it's proven with this customer base, and they use it in this operational context. I'm not sure that our DHS or Customs and Border Protection partners really cared that Tier 1 SOF was employing the capability or whatever. They really were hyper focused on their specific mission and their specific problem that they were attempting to solve. And I don't know that all the luster of like this has been used in this conflict and this has been used in this way or on a international border really played at all. It seemed to be more important how exactly the capability fit their need and how willing you were to adapt it to that need.
Simon, what do you see on from the Capitol Hill policymaker side of the house? Is there that shift seems like it's got to be real, right? Like some amount of enhanced energy resourcing to the border through DHS and other things. Is there
My
overlap?
answer would be eventually, but not yet.
Eventually, what resourcing, money flows?
Yeah. I think eventually you'll see an uptick in resources once the Trump admin and sort of the Republican trifecta that runs the government has an opportunity to put their stamp on things.
Yeah.
But the CR is Biden funding levels, right? Yeah. So we've got 6 more months of Biden level funding, and there's conversations about doing reconciliation, which would certainly give a bump to DHS. I think it's unclear how much that's going to be. Certainly 100 million at least, probably north. And I think a not small portion of that is going to be spent on the wall and infrastructure to support the wall. I think the Trump admin is going to be pretty hot to finish that project from Trump admin 1. But there's a real question of when are we going to do reconciliation? I mean, the Congress has already turned into budget conversations around fiscal year 25. There's just not a lot of space on the calendar to get everything you want to get done. So when they do reconciliation, it's going to chew up a ton of floor time, and that will be all Congress does for a little while. We've
seen a huge amount of energy and certainly media press attention to the effects of DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, and related authorities, consultants, contractors, whomever, kind of like combing through the federal government and shuttering agencies or severely restricting their ability to work and whatever else. A marquee example of that would be USAID, perhaps Department of Education, etc. We don't hear a lot about DOGE putting DHS and its sub-agencies in its sights. At least I haven't. Are they somehow like being protected by a Trump umbrella, or am I just misperceiving things and there is a DOGE movement going on at DHS? And I guess the real question at the tail end of that is, are programs at risk? In other words, should the innovation economy treat this as an expansion market, or is it at risk just like any other federal agency is right now?
So I'd say there's a couple of things. One, there's definitely been at least several hundred people fired from DHS. And earlier this week, actually late last week, there's some House Democrats on the Homeland Security Committee that have asked GAO to review what DOGE has done at DHS. So
interesting.
For those who aren't entirely familiar with this process, the chair of any committee in Congress can request GAO to conduct a review, and they'll just do it. doesn't require a change in law. GAO can just go review things at the request of Congress. So that's not the chair. The Democrats have the ranking position. So unless the chair signed on to that, GAO is not required to take that action. But that being said, several hundred is the most I could find on the news about being, fired or taking early release from DHS, which is dramatically less than anywhere else that I've seen as far as getting touched by DOJ. So I think the instincts there are probably right.
As a percentage of workforce, you're talking about,
Yeah, I mean, this is. I mean, we're looking at like 60,000 people at VA versus hundreds at DHS, and DHS is, to be clear, the largest agency.
Yeah, it's massive.
It's massive. Yeah. But CBP, historically has always had a hard time hiring and filling those seats. So, the kind of the portions of the agency that do a lot of the immigration enforcement are kind of understaffed to begin with. Yeah. So I'd be surprised to see them take big staffing hits.
I have a cousin who was a longtime Border Patrol officer out in El Centro, California, way out kind of in the desert east of San Diego. And he would always remark at how, one, they seem to be poorly equipped, right? Which is the topic that we keep drumming on here. Yeah. But to your point, also very difficult to recruit and retain good talent. So you had kind of you were heavy on very experienced kind of lifer, careerist type CBP officers. And the funnel, I think, was thinning out in terms of onboarding, new young CBP officers.
Here's the thing. This was an old favorite pet project of mine when I worked in the Congress, which is the Skill Bridge program at DOD, which I think is pretty popular now and people have heard of. It's a program that lets you start a new employment or an internship your last 3 to 6 months of your DOD career. I don't know why we're not just pumping them into places like CBP.
Interesting.
Yeah. You could send them to a FLETC, the academy that trains up a federal law enforcement officers, about 3 months. You could let a good Marine go 3 months early to go attend the FLETC instead of making them guard the gate at Lejeune for 3 months, which is, to be clear, what we do to short timers. And I will not hear differently from anyone else. I know what we do to short timers.
They never assigned me gate guard duty when I was getting out as a junior captain.
Yeah, as a junior captain. That's so weird. Man, I remember being in a holding company waiting to train and being babysat by a bunch of hardened 0311 sergeants that were so mad that they got retasked to be babysitters on Camp Johnson.
I do remember, total aside, Dave's got a serious point to make here in just a second. My last memory of being a junior enlisted Marine before I went off to OCS and did that was literally painting rocks, literally painting rocks white and then making them look great for the first sergeant. I mean, that's literally my last memory. It's like a meme of itself almost.
Sticks with
Dave,
you.
Sorry.
I'll have to come back to that one at some point and tell you about my 3 days of picking up pine cones story. Stupid exists everywhere, including in the Army.
Everywhere.
Fort Bragg had one of the most expensive pine cone eradication strategies.
Fort Bragg. Oh yeah, no, it's still called Fort Bragg. I was about to say it's Fort Liberty.
It's back to being called.
But it's a different
Fort
bragg. It's a different bragg.
It's a different bragg. We found another one. Yeah, no. Well, I was going to say I was actually going to disagree with Simon on the answer to the CBP staffing crisis.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't think he's not anymore. The former assistant commissioner for acquisition at CBP was a guy named Mark Burkowski, and Mark. I asked Mark when we were talking about I was working with him on something related to their surveillance towers, and I asked him about that problem. Said, hey, why don't you just, because he'd been very public about the hardest problem that I have, even from an acquisitions perspective, is getting a whole bunch of people that want to do this job. And I said, hey, look, GWOT is winding down. Why don't you just grab every GWOT veteran and put a uniform on them? I'm sure there's some law enforcement easy path there where you could establish a pipeline with the Department of Defense. He said we actually tried. The problem was twofold. First, those guys are used to working on a team. They've never done anything where they're not surrounded by their buddies. And they're completely by themselves with a mile on either side of them. And it makes many of them uncomfortable. We've had many success stories, but many of them just do not want to be completely alone. It freaks them out a little bit. And second, if you look at the southern border and you look at the school districts associated, most of those guys are in the time in their life where they're potentially starting a family, and we're putting them out like in the middle of absolute nowhere. And it's not where they want to start their family.
Yeah, I'm actually not recommending the GWOT folks. The first termers, like the people who are wrapping up 4 years in the military right now, joined in 2021, well after the end of the wars, right? We're talking about kids. We are old.
I don't remember hearing about anybody from my networks leaving military service and going to CBP. I had friends go to ATF and DEA and the FBI and everything else, and places in the IC, but I never heard about people going to DHS or CBP. Maybe I'm gonna have to think about that. Simon, you mentioned, or maybe it was Dave mentioned, kind of the front doors that are available to folks moving into what I think we perceive as an expansion market from DoD into DHS and related agencies. One of those front doors that isn't servicing DHS, at least not yet, is Defense Innovation Unit. And I think we mentioned this last time when we spoke, but DIU is facilitating with significant contract and significant resourcing some expatriation of Ukraine, Russia drone, counter drone lessons learned into a combined contract that's actually seeing American companies on contract with Ukrainian companies to build and deploy things for the U.S. Warfighting establishment. I'll just note that seems funny, perhaps very, very good, right? But like interesting, given that the Trump administration is sort of on again, off again with Ukraine, trying to bring the war to an end, but also, bringing people onto contract, but also chewing President Zelensky out in the White House, but also making friends, making nice with Vladimir Putin, but also putting pressure on all of the above. It's a really kind of interesting scenario. That I think to the bystander probably doesn't make a ton of sense. But I do think that it's useful at a minimum and perhaps critical that we expatriate the learnings from places like Ukraine, and not just for drones. I mean, there's a giant electronic warfare problem over there, signals management problem, comms, GPS denied, assured position navigation timing, alternative navigation, alt nav, all kinds of different problems over there that are actively being solved on both sides of that conflict, that we need to learn, because that is the future, that is the present and the future of conflict. Do you guys have thoughts on maybe what some of those technologies are beyond drones, or if you have thoughts on maybe the seeming irony of the Trump administration vis-a-vis the belligerents and DIU contracting with Ukrainian companies? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, what I'll say is one of the topics that you mentioned and that folks love to talk about in the space is, what are the critical technologies that are coming out of it right now? The fact is they move too fast to even really hang your hat. And this is the thing I always get concerned about when we in the DoD space. Well, we need to create an office for autonomy. We need to create an office for one-way drones. We need to create infrastructure to build towards this thing. But the iteration on the battlefield is so fast that may not be the thing by the time you stood up your infrastructure to design, develop, and buy that thing.
Is that why the Marine Corps still doesn't have tactical mobile devices? They're still waiting. They're still waiting for the next thing.
Yeah, they're waiting to see what's going to supplant the cell phone. We were not so sure that one's going to stick around.
Yep.
But there was a comment from the French defense minister during Ukraine, who was commenting on all the videos we were seeing coming out of Ukraine, these like successful drone strikes. He's like, for every successful drone strike video you watch, there's like 100 failed ones. You have no concept of how quickly this tech iterates, becomes obsolete, and then gets refined, and you're only catching these like flash in the pan successes, which is, in my mind, the absolute like proof in the pudding that we have to have some level of involvement in all of these conflicts, at least awareness. We need to be treating it as top of funnel for what's next, because the iteration is fast, and the iteration is fast because of the Joes, because the young people who fight are going to find, the fastest way to the bottom of the drain. They're going to build the better mousetrap every time. And they're not going to sit static and be like, well, this is what I have, so I guess I'll just get rolled over by the Russians. They're going to build something else.
Yeah, despite all the energy around like algorithmic warfare and autonomy and robot on robot, battles and all that, so there's still humans at the center of everything here. Dave, chime in here, and then I want to orient this conversation in maybe a specific direction around partnering with foreign companies.
Yeah, so I think that a little bit of the hesitation for me or for firms like ours is always going to be ITAR, Arms Export Control, right? Is this activity or joint activity sanctioned by Uncle Sam, or is Uncle Sam looking the other way? I'm not sure why. I mean, there are a whole bunch of funds and foundations, some American taxpayer funded and funded by the other nation, between us and Israel, us and Ukraine, us and Taiwan, that those are funded by both sides. And those are fundamentally like science maturation, joint intellectual property development between a U.S. company and one of those companies. There's a lot of precedent for doing that, but a lot of it's in like med sciences. There's a few of them, like the bird. I think the bird grant between the U.S. and Israel can cover some defense stuff, but it has to be dual use. So like there's a lot of precedent for like joint investment in like really critical technology areas between us and all of those countries. But all of them seem to really shy away from the defense topic for, I assume, political reasons. But I would want some, I don't know, documentation, support, public assertion that it's okay to engage in like joint technology development and tackle it between our company and
interestingly, whether you consider this defense or not, I mean, it is a form of defense, or it's adjacent to or overlapping with defense. Cyber security has long been an expertise in the Israeli business and military and intelligence and security establishment. And we just saw that, the acquisition announced from Alphabet or Google of the Israeli cyber firm Wiz for something like $32 billion. And so, Unit 8200, which is the signals entity, the signals intelligence and signals prosecution entity in the Israeli Defense Force. I actually don't know if it's part of IDF or if it's, part of the IC somewhere else. But anyway, it's long been understood to be the creme de la creme of the world's cybersecurity experts and electronic warfare and signals intelligence capabilities. Second only perhaps to, the tier A plus whatever on the American side, but I'm not even sure that's true because a lot of the tools flow both directions across that partnering divide. Simon, you were going to jump in, but I mean, the direction I want to take this is it safe for American tech companies, defense tech companies, to be partnering with foreign entities? And I'm thinking specifically Ukraine, Israel, perhaps Taiwan, others.
So I want to touch ITAR before we flow into that because
sure.
I think
it's all related. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's two big relevant pieces here, which is the AUKUS exemption to ITAR,
sure,
which is an interim rule that went into effect last year. But there's like a very clear desire from Congress and from the executive branch to streamline ITAR. And I know that the House Foreign Affairs Committee in particular is looking at this really heavily. There's a task force being headed up by Congressman Zinke. And they've been very aggressive in getting feedback from industry to inform that process. So I think, Dave, to your point, that's being heard by the government for sure. This idea that like, hey, there's a roadblock here. We're developing great tech that can be applicable and we can learn a lot of lessons, but we need to be able to be moving across these borders more freely. And then, Garrett, to your point, regardless of what bureaucratic hurdles are in the way, I think small companies can't afford not to. I think you have two. The number one problem on everyone's plate is like, who can pay me fast enough to keep my company alive? And if you have the opportunity to partner with a foreign ally, or a foreign friendly nation, do it. Full stop. And if you have to reevaluate that because the U.S. or the allied position is shifting, then you reevaluate it. But in the meantime, generate revenue. That should be like the first and last of every conversation you have is, are we generating revenue from this? And I think there's a bunch of ancillary areas, obviously, learning from the battlefields and becoming experts in the problem sets for the geographic locations where those allies exist is a critical advantage in competition. But you really can't turn down the money. I'd be shocked to meet the small business who can just say, I'm not going to do that because what if we change our opinion later?
Well, I'll say that a principles-based approach that still allows for flexibility is probably the best one. Certainly the one that we've chosen at our company, and that is from the founding. We decided we're not going to sell to this short list of countries and entities that we do not believe are doing good for the world. And you can imagine what that short list of countries is. It's the same one that
probably looks a lot like the travel ban.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like exactly the travel restriction list. It's exactly that. But I mean, otherwise, I think I'm with you. I think young companies can't afford not to, at minimum, learn from the real experiences of countries and militaries that are actively in conflict in this generation. I mean, this is certainly different. We are perhaps at risk if we don't do that. We're as a nation, we're perhaps at risk of applying the wrong lessons from open desert warfare against medieval opponents and insurgent terrorist groups to the conflicts that might be just over the horizon with peer or near peer competitors, China, Russia, whatever, right? And God forbid we actually enter conflict with any entity like that. But I mean, we have to apply new lessons, both from the technology standpoint, but also from the military practitioner and strategy standpoint. One of the places where all of that gets tested and evaluated, and certainly we're seeing the proliferation and experimentation of tech in the same vein that we're talking about, expatriated learnings from Ukraine, et cetera, to places like big exercises like Project Convergence. The U.S. Army's 18th Airborne Corps convenes a fires-centric experimentation event series called Scarlet Dragon. It's becoming, I think, apparent to me that there is no shortage of experiments and events and exercises that companies can opt into for participation and visibility with customers and partners across that divide. But My question is, are these big exercises worth trying to get into? Are they serving the industry? Are they serving the customer adequately? It's been actually some time since I was actually at one of these events, but Dave, you may have participated in or been a part of one of these more recently than I have. Do you have a perspective on whether these things are actually yielding value across the military industrial complex?
Yeah, Reveal's been to many. I've been to many of these events. I think that we've been appropriately very selective. I think that participation in one of these events, in my mind, it must be securing one of the ingredients of one of your company objectives, one of your sales or your capture efforts. I think that if you're garnering the attention of one of the efforts or programs or key people that are going to be important to your success, you also need to be prepared to I think criteria for showing up at all is be prepared to show very well in the context of the event. If you perform poorly, it can be a death sentence. If you perform okay, you'll be forgotten. So you have to sort of show up and knock it out of the park, which also means that if you need to knock it out of the park, the investment for the organization well surpasses that of the actual execution of the event. So you have to be fairly ruthless in the prioritization of the events that you will attend. It makes it a lot more palatable when when participation in events from the industry side is funded or paid by the United States government, which can be common, it can be rare depending on the size and scope of the exercise. But whether the exercise itself is paying you, or it's a funded test as part of one of your milestones, is one of your projects, which I think is our preferred going in position.
That's how we usually do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of having a test or a milestone tied to something that happens in the back 40 of an installation where there's no visibility to help transition that project, why not do it at a major event? So the best case is your PM is saying, hey, I'm excited about your thing. I want to help it transition, or human beings are human beings. I also want it to help me look good at this big event with senior brass and that sort of thing. So come as part of this project and perform at this event. I think those cases are it's a no brainer, and you should go and you should execute to the best of your ability. But almost no situation I can think of would take precedence. Still, almost no situation I can think of would take precedence over a unilateral, like one-to-one sort of engagement that focuses on the real user or the real, 5 to 20 people
Sure.
that are going to help you move the capability, who are just completely free of distractions. Because there's a con-op match for all of these things. You mentioned Scarlet Dragon. Scarlet Dragon is great. If your capability is directly relevant to, the Maven program or big core level like StaffX, CPX, DataGam, that is probably very likely an event that you should attend. If your capability is not relevant in that sort of fires decision kill chain at the core level, then you're probably not going to get a ton out of it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we've got friends in the network who have built companies not on venture capital investments, but on bootstrapping and hopping exercise to exercise, event to event, and having the customer fund their participation, and they develop and refine the product in between exercises. And I think I've seen examples of some pretty cool, viable technologies emerging from that type of a go-to-market and product development set of strategies. It probably just depends on what you're trying to do and who you're trying to reach, right? I mean, I think any of these events probably can be useful. Some of them are probably a little bit over-engineered and overwrought and encumbered by politics and everything else. I don't know if Project Convergence is still a meaningful touchstone for the annual events and exercises calendar, but it's not alone, right? There's Rim of the Pacific exercise. There's all kinds of giant multilateral, even in some cases, exercises. So if you're there for business development and kind of top of funnel exposure to customer purposes, these events are probably great. If you're trying to get in on Maven Smart System and you care only about fires and automated target recognition or whatever else, perhaps the Scarlet Dragon series is one that you want to get involved with. And that's a core level exercise with the premier warfighting core level entity within the U.S. Army. So, I mean, basically it doesn't get any more premier than that. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I would still probably put it, maybe a rung or two higher than the trade show, right? It's, in my mind, it is still sure. fundamentally a marketing exercise, unless you're like solving some critical prioritized problem of that event. And the exercise funding, you're absolutely right. There are lots of folks that survive or really uses a bridge, right? Or hopefully uses a bridge exercise funding. And the marketing component is fantastic. It's not sustainable. Unless your intention is to be a services company that supports exercises, unless that's the end state goal, that's all just a means to keep the organization running until you can generate enough energy to transition that capability off the exercises and into the actual MTO.
My memory earlier of the last thing that I remember as a junior enlisted Marine was actually at a service level training exercise, or SLTE. It was either an ITX or an MRX. I forget what it was exactly, out in the desert and outside of Las Vegas. And that's where I painted rocks. So, at Scarlet Dragon, I'm sure they have, many of the Joes, as they say, many of the Joes, or the, what'd you call it? The Spec
4 Mafia.
The Spec 4 Mafia. The Spec 4 Mafia is out, picking up pine cones, while, targeteers are raining fire down with Maven Smart System and 155s. Well, gents, any parting shots, any Michael Mann references, any recommended watching, viewing for the week? What are you guys looking forward to this week?
Not for me. I'm all full up on Michael Mann. I think, having done my Heat and Collateral rewatch, I'm gonna have to pivot to something new so that we don't spend every week talking about Michael Mann.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Christopher Nolan. We should do Christopher Nolan next.
Just pivot to Nolan next.
Yeah,
do some Nolan. Sure. All right. Then quick lightning round. What's your go-to Nolan movie, Dave?
Probably Tenet.
Tenet's great,
Tenet?
right?
Yeah.
Tenet's great, isn't it?
You guys
It
are
is.
out of your minds.
It is
a backwards movie.
I mean,
Tenet's
I think
great.
that he's done like 10 or 12, and I think I've really enjoyed all of them. So that's hard, but I'd probably say Tenet.
I mean, Dark Knight's almost unbeatable, right? I mean,
Dark Knight is almost unbeatable. The Prestige is almost unbeatable. I mean, the man can't lose.
I'm doing Interstellar because I believe in love.
Gents, as always, it's been real, enlivening, and energizing and re-energizing. Thanks for joining me. For everybody out there, stay tuned. We drop one of these every Thursday morning, And hopefully we're covering the topics that you think and care about. If we're not, send us a note. We're eager to hear back from everybody, on topics of interest and making sure that we're staying relevant here. Also, if you have JD Vance memes you need Simon's expert take on, send them. If you have questions for Tenet Timeline, that's Dave. And until next time, we'll see you.